Coming up today on Seahawks Forever, we continue our positional ranking series. Part 4 out of 5 today. We're going to talk about cornerbacks on the defensive side of the ball and then pass catchers on the offensive side of the ball. Wide receiver and tight end. All three big needs for the Seahawks. Which guys do I like the best and which guys do I think fit the best? Coming up next on this episode of Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Shout out to the folks at Doer, Built for Doing, a proud sponsor of the program. Flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles, but you can find everything you need right here on shopdoer.com, spelled D-U-E-R. And these right here are my daily go-tos, these performance stretch denim jeans, 20% stretch. They are made from sustainable, breathable, antibacterial materials. And trust me, you can wear them for any occasion. Incredibly comfortable, incredibly light. They move with you, but they're also built tough. They are built for doing. And right now you can save 20% off your first order if you go to shopdoer.com/forever. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/forever for 20% off your first order. All right, you guys, welcome back. So happy Thursday. We are 4/5 of the way through these positional rankings. And just another reminder of how I do these. These are not my view of the 5 best players at each position. These are the 5 players that I like the most, that I think will fit the Seahawks, that I think will be available to the Seahawks. You'll see an example of that today in the tight end group where there's one prominent name missing because I just don't think he's going to be there at 18. I think it'd take too much heavy lifting for the Seahawks to move up and trade to get him earlier in the first round. Before we get into this, as always, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notification of future episodes, and all the other ways you can support me and the channel are linked down below in the description. If you haven't caught up so far, be sure to head back and check out the first 3 parts of these rankings. And then Saturday night, we'll do a live show. These have all been pre-recorded episodes, but we will go live again on Saturday, get some of your feedback, and I'll go through again and recap every single position group, and we'll kind of put a bow on this as we head into next week, and then really start to focus on some of the bigger picture stories in the draft with some of the draft analysts and guests and some of the better scouts that are out there, including a few surprises coming your way as guests that I'm really excited to have on the show as well. Let's get into this. We're starting 2 position groups on each side of the ball, although to make the math work today, we're going to do pass catchers, which means wide receivers and tight ends on offense. But let's start on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to start with corners. And this is a positional need that I've been emphasizing for quite some time, but I get some pushback online. Hey, we've got Reek Woolen, we've got Devin Witherspoon, we've got Josh Joe. We drafted Nehemiah Pritchett last year in the 5th round out of Auburn. I don't think that's good enough, first of all. Second of all, the Reek Woolen situation, I don't think is any more clear today than it has been over the last season and a half. Very polarizing prospect at this point. It's amazing how much time flies. Like, he is in the 4th year of his rookie contract coming up, and it feels like he was just drafted out of UTSA. Still some questions about how physical he can be. Does he give you what Mike McDonald wants in the run game coming up and supporting? And even some of the coverage stuff. We saw such an instinctive player as a rookie, and we saw a bunch of ball production and interceptions as a result of it, not so much lately, although some of the analytics and the PFF grades and some of the coverage grades still look good. And look, you can't deny the size, the length, the speed, the athletic ability. But this could go either way. Either he isn't the kind of guy that Mike McDonald wants to move forward with, and so they don't extend him after this season, or he puts together a great year and has one hell of a market coming off of that season, in which case there could at least be a comp pick coming back, or they could consider potentially franchising him or just trying to work out a long-term extension. But then right on the heels of that, you're going to have to turn around and pay Devin Witherspoon, right? Then there's the question of Witherspoon's fit and role. And I've been saying for a while now, I don't want him to be a full-time slot guy long-term. There's just too much physical punishment that happens down there, placing him in the box as much as they do. The impact is undeniable. The versatility is really his calling card. I'm not saying move him full time to the boundary, but play him primarily on the boundary, and then you can bring him in situationally. I just don't want him to be in there full time. And so there's those questions. And then there's, let's see what Josh Jobe can really give us. We saw a half season out of him last year that was, this was a day 3 7th rounder. That was a practice squad guy. The Seahawks poached, and they found a player. But is he a guy you can count on 17 games, every game in and out on the boundary to be a full-time starter? Not so sure. Even if he is, the way that Mike Macdonald likes to use his corners and move them around, there's needs there. I think you need 5 good ones on the roster, and we don't know enough about Pritchett. I think this is a significant need, and I think it matches this cornerback class in such a way that you're going to see a corner taken on day 2, because there's some strength in this class through the top 100 picks. The Seahawks right now, as we sit, have 4 picks, of course, on day 2. But after that, day 3, it really drops off, especially when you're looking for longer, taller, more physical boundary corners. A lot of smaller slot guys on day 3, which, if they do pass on the position on day 2, they could still go there, right? For the reasons that I just pointed out, especially regarding Devin Witherspoon. But I do think it's a need, and I think there are some corners in this draft that Mike Macdonald is going to like, and that would be fits in this defense. And here we go. And again, some of the guys at the top of the draft, I'm not listing here, obviously, Travis Hunter, I even think guys like Will Johnson, it's very, very unlikely that they make it to the Seahawks. So these are my 5, right? Jahdae Barron, I've talked quite a bit about him. He's kind of gotten pigeonholed a little bit as a slot-only guy, simply because of his size. He's 5'11", 200. I actually think the way he's put together, he can play just about anything in the defensive backfield, and in fact has at Texas. He has experience as deep safety, on the boundary, in the slot. He's built differently than Devin Witherspoon. If Jahdae Barron happened to be the pick at 18, that would cause a lot of confusion, a lot of consternation among the fan base. I get it, because of some of the reasons I've already touched on. Like the positional value, the perception of positional value just isn't going to be there for a lot of the fan base. But if they were to have sort of the vision to go, first of all, best player available, stick to your board, right? I think Jahdae Barron possesses a lot of Seahawky and Mike Macdonald characteristics that's going to make him very attractive and earn him a high grade on their board. If he's the pick at 18 and you don't like it, just give it time. Go watch tape and then consider the role and listen to the conversations after the draft as far as how he might fit. Because I would suspect that if Jahdae Barron ends up a Seahawk at some point, that he would become the primary slot guy and Devin Witherspoon would play more outside. Very experienced player, 57 games, all at Texas, 226 tackles, 26 tackles for loss, 8 interceptions. He's physical. He can come up and support the run. He can go sideline to sideline. He's an outstanding athlete. And like I said, the build really holds up. He can play deep safety. There's some Kobe Bryant in his game in the sense that, he's a corner, but he's kind of, you could see safety in that package. Right? He's just built that way. And one of the leaders of that Texas defense. And certainly, there's some connections there. Byron Murphy's obviously going to be familiar with him. And we know how important those always are to John Schneider. Azariah Thomas was a guy that I got to see up close down at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was the best corner there the entire week. I know Trey Amos showed up Tuesday and Wednesday and showed some flashes, and then he was one of those guys that checked out early because he felt like he had done enough. And I think there were some whispers that he was nursing a nagging injury down there as well. But Thomas was simply the best man coverage corner in Mobile the entire week. He's tall, he's long, he's a guy that if he doesn't become a Seahawk, I could see him becoming a Raider, because I think Pete Carroll's really going to be attracted to this guy. 6'2", 198 pounds, very, very consistent performer throughout his career. The 4th lowest target rate in FBS last year. And so, the production isn't there, the interceptions, the pass breakups, because teams just didn't want to throw his way. They were just afraid to do it. And you could see why at the Senior Bowl, especially on that Wednesday practice where everyone went full pads. And then Thursday when they did red zone stuff, he was really, really outstanding at mirroring receivers, playing press man, comfortable in zone and man, and does not shy away from contact. Loves to come up and hit. Doesn't try to duck out of the way at all, but needs a little bit of technical refinement as a tackler. And that's certainly something that we would expect that they would get in Seattle. With anytime Mike McDonald's involved, you're going to get work as a tackler. Then I want to talk about the third guy on my list. The only reason that he's not first of all, I think it speaks to the two guys ahead of him. I think there's, for different reasons, I think those two players are a little bit more accomplished. They've done it. There's a bigger sample size. Ravel really only had the one big year of production. That was 2023, and then 2024, because of the production in 2023, had a lot of buzz, had a first-round grade. He was in a lot of the preseason mock drafts as a top 15 player, cornerback 1 in this class, and then he tears his ACL early in the season. So there's obviously medical concerns there, but there's no reason to think that he's not going to check out. This is a guy that he's 6'3", 193 pounds. Again, if he's not a Seahawk, he's probably going to be a Raider. His combined PFF grade over the last 2 seasons, all categories, run, coverage, over 80, which is basically elite level grading from their website. Incredibly instinctive. He's a smooth mover, breaks on the ball very quickly. He craves contact at the line of scrimmage. One of my favorite games to watch on the All-22 was the Michigan game in 2023. He had some incredible coverage reps there, including one where he makes an instinctive decision to drop back in his zone kind of late. He's reading the quarterback's eyes, makes a play on a ball, breaks it up in the end zone to Colson Loveland, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, who appeared to be open on the play. Just incredibly instinctive play. But then you also, in that game, see multiple examples of him coming up in goal line and really making an impact at the line of scrimmage. Incredibly physical presence. I could have easily put him at number 1 on this list. I think the knee is the only reason that I didn't. But all the reports seem to be that he's expected to make a full recovery. And with the timeline with ACLs these days, I think it sounds like he might be on track to be ready at the beginning of the season. We do know this as well. Came out yesterday. He is going to visit the Seahawks on the 14th and 15th of this month as one of their top 30 visits. So the Seahawks certainly, whether they've met with him before, want to get him in the VMAC, want to show him the facility, want to get the staff to meet him, work some stuff on the board, and certainly do their own medical testing as well, make sure that knee checks out. Siobhan Ravel is a guy you might not have heard that much about because of the knee. He just seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle. We see guys all the time that have knee injuries coming out in their draft year, and it doesn't really impact their stock. I always think about Jeffrey Simmons when that happened. Still went in the top 25, even though he was coming off an ACL that I think was later in his season as well. This one was early for Ravel. And he's absolutely a guy that I could see being in play at 18 because the Seahawks are going to have a high grade on him. If he checks out medically, he very possibly could be at the top of the board when they look up there, when they're sitting on the clock in the first round. Get ready for it. Number 4 on this list, a guy that I know is a favorite of many of you. Also got to see him at the Senior Bowl, although he was one of those kind of enigmatic players where, first of all, coming in, I wanted to see him because he was listed at 6'4" his entire career at Iowa State. Not 6'4", 6'2", still a long player, though, 194 pounds. He really has sort of that perfect boundary corner build. And he has a background and a profile that we're used to seeing around here as Seahawks, right? We saw it with Reek Woolen. We certainly saw it with Richard Sherman. He's got a track background and a wide receiver background. Actually started out with the Hawkeyes, or with the Cyclones, Iowa State we're talking about here, as a wide receiver. Converted to corner in 2022, started 36 games since. Things really clicked last year in terms of ball production. Only 1 interception up until last season, 3 last year. And one of them is the best rep that I saw from a corner of any cornerback in the draft class this year, where he's facing Iowa and he comes up and he's covering the flat receiver. I think it was a running back coming out in the flat. He comes up and takes on, first thing he does, takes a block on, head on, just sheds the block physically, takes it on, gets away from the block, then goes to his assignment, goes to cover his flat receiver, reads the quarterback's eyes, realizes he's thrown to the second level, peels off of the wheel route, and takes the seam, which wasn't his primary responsibility, intercepts the ball. It's unbelievable. I posted on Twitter the other day. In fact, you might be watching it right now. I'm when I record this, I'll edit it on there if I can. Simply one of the best reps by a corner I saw this year in studying tape, Darian Porter, and also because he was kind of late to the position. I think there's a lot of tip of the iceberg at play here as well. His best football still ahead of him. And then Trey Amos, another guy that, again, was a standout down in Mobile, but didn't stay for the entire week. 6'1", 190, very productive. 3 interceptions and 11 pass breakups last season at Ole Miss. And another one of those corners that's just, he physically looks apart, but he would fit in a Mike McDonald defense because he's just as good in run support as he is in zone, as he is in man. Very consistent, versatile performer, and another guy that you can move around. All right, should we talk about some offensive weapons? Let's talk about the pass catchers. This is always fun, and this is one that has gotten so much debate over the last few weeks, ever since DK Metcalf was traded. I can't quite remember another draft scenario that has gotten so much debate among fan base and so much indecision and disagreement about what to do at the receiver position. Some of you want to go receiver at 18. We've been having a discussion about Tet McMillan online for the last couple of days. I don't have him on this list for 2 reasons. One is, at the end of the day, I really don't think he's going to be there at 18. It seemed like draft fatigue fit in or kicked in. He was a top 10, top 15 guy until about a month ago. And then it seems like he kind of slipped all the way to the end of the first round in some major mock drafts. And now it seems like things are kind of correcting and he's back where he belongs. His catch radius, his contested catch ability, just the length, the wingspan, the volleyball background, all of that. I think it's going to be really attractive. And I do think he ends up being the first receiver taken, which is one of the reasons I don't have him on my list. The other one is I'm just not as high on him as some of y'all are and as some other scouts are. I see reps where he takes off and he dogs it. And if he's not the intended target, if he's on the backside of the play, he almost gives the play away because of his slow release off the line of scrimmage. I think he's really raw when it comes to his release package. I think sometimes his route running is good. I had someone tell me on Twitter today he's the best route runner in the class. I vehemently disagree with that. He might be capable of running the best routes in the class, but we don't see it on a consistent basis, and that's why I don't have him on my list. But if you want a tall boundary receiver that checks almost all of the boxes as Teteroa and McMillan, then you can find those in Jaden Higgins, and you can get him in the second round instead of at 18. 6'4", 214, 140 catches, 2,100 yards, 15 touchdowns, 15 and a half yards per catch over his career with the Cyclones. His arm length and wingspan are 93rd percentile, almost identical to Teteroa McMillan. I was a little behind in my own notes here. He has longer arms, a bigger wingspan, a better 40 time, and a better 10-yard split than Tet McMillan. He's the same height, and he's only 5 pounds lighter. He's basically a bargain Teteroa McMillan. And another reason I didn't put him on this list, because I would much rather take Jaden Higgins in the second round than Tet McMillan in the first. Really, really like him. Emeka Egbuka is my number 2 on this list. He's a guy, obviously, he's from the state of Washington, grew up in Tacoma, huge Seahawk fan. He would love for this to happen. And there would be a lot of deja vu if he was the pick at 18 after his former teammate at Ohio State was the pick at 20 for the Seahawks 2 years ago, Jackson Smith and Jigba. And their careers are forever intertwined. Like they obviously overlapped. They played together for a year at Ohio State. But in 2022, when JSN was hurt and missed most of that season before declaring for the draft, that gave Ibuka an opportunity. And he stepped up, 74 catches, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. Very similar numbers to the crazy productive 2021 that JSN put up the year before. They are similar players. In that they've mostly played slot, but don't think of them as a slot only player. He can play outside. He's the all-time leader in Ohio State history in receiving, in catches and receiving yards. And to me, his physical and athletic comp is, although he's a slightly better athlete, but physically they're basically the same body type, is Robert Woods. And we saw the success that Robert Woods had in a very similar passing scheme with the Rams all those years as a guy that can really run good routes. And he can get the release off the line of scrimmage. He's physical. He can handle press, and he can run routes from the inside and the outside, and really, I think, is a fit for this scheme. You've heard me talk about Alec Manor from Stanford, 6'1.5", 206 pounds. Very productive last 2 seasons, 125 catches, almost 1,900 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Really great combination of size and strength, allows him to also succeed against press coverage. One of the better release packages on this list, and also the best blocker. Like, this guy loves blocking. He's going to have fans in that building, not the least of which would be Doug Baldwin, right? Stanford alum, former Seahawk great wide receiver, and someone who also loved to block and had a great release package off the line of scrimmage, although Io Manor is a much longer player, outstanding at contested catches and the physical part of the game. He's a guy you might know the least, be the least familiar with of anyone on this list, but if he's the pick, you might end up liking him the most. He'd be an outstanding fit in this class. Kyle Williams, this is not, I know I'm wearing my WSU shirt today. This is not a homer pick, and I can back that assertion up by just pointing you towards all the other big name draft analysts out there and take a look at where they have Kyle Williams ranked now compared to where they did a couple of months ago. He has been rising up everyone's draft boards after an outstanding showing at the Senior Bowl, which was a great stroke of good fortune for him. He had already accepted an invitation to the Shrine Game, was going to go there, and then last minute got invited to the Senior Bowl, decided to switch over there. Just under 5'11", 190 pounds. He does possess the best release package at the line of scrimmage in the class. His footwork, his short area quickness is Baldwin-esque, actually, in how he gets his releases. And he's faster than I thought he was watching him at UNLV and WSU. 88th percentile in the 40-yard dash, and a really, really excellent route runner. He just gets open all the time. I mean, that's really the true mark. We can analyze and overanalyze all these combine numbers and the analytics and everything else. But at the end of the day, like, this guy gets separation at the second level. He's also really accomplished on screens and bubble screens, things in the backfield. They ran a lot of those at WSU, and he's a better runner after the catch than I think people give him credit for as well. And then Jack Besh, the story, MVP of the Senior Bowl, a month after his brother was killed in New Orleans, wore his number, the whole thing. But he's not just a feel-good story. The Puka Nacua comps, I think, are pretty accurate. 6'1", 213, maybe the most physical player, right there with Io Manor on this list. Very solid route runner, very strong at the top of his routes. Like, if a corner or safety tries to bully him, he's going to win that battle more often than not. And he had one of the best quotes, I think, of the draft season when asked why he's so good at contested catches, or as they're otherwise known as 50-50 balls. He says, I actually consider them 75-25 balls because that's how many of them I come down with. Just a very, very tough player. And for that reason, I think a guy that Clint Kubiak and that offensive staff would really, really be attracted to. So I said we're going to give you the whole group of pass catchers just so the math works, and leaves us tomorrow with one defensive group and one offensive group, which tomorrow then we'll be doing the safeties and the quarterbacks, saving that one for last for dramatic effect. But let's get into the tight ends. This is a really fun group. At the beginning of the draft process, I saw one, I think it was Matt Miller. It was either Matt Miller or Dane Brugler. One of the big analysts out there said it was the best tight end draft since 2010. Now, since then, I feel like people have dialed back a little bit of the hyperbole on the class, but it is a very, very good. It's outstanding through the first 3 days. But if you don't get one of those first 5 picks, you can still get a guy on day 3. It's just they just might not have the production. You're projecting a little bit more, and you might have some guys that are a little bit more specialized. Guys like Jackson Hawes, who might be an elite blocker, might need some work in the receiving game. But all the guys on my list are guys that really excel at all aspects of being a tight end. I didn't put Tyler Warren on here. Great example of how I did my rankings. I just don't see any world where he gets to 18. I still think he goes higher than people are even expecting him to. I think he could go top 10 in this class that lacks blue chip players. This is a guy that I think a lot of draft rooms are going to have future all-pro grades on. And for that reason, and due to the lack of those types of grades across the board in this draft class, I just don't see him getting to 18. Will they trade up for him? Gave you some scenarios on the show last week about what it would take to get all the way up to every spot up until 10. It's doable. I just don't know that it makes sense to spend those kind of resources to get Tyler Warren when it's such a good class and you can get one of these other guys and a little bit of a discount, right? You're not getting $1 for $1, but pretty darn close, and you can still get a great player. And the best example of that is the first guy on my list, Colson Loveland. Some people actually are now starting to make the argument that he's better than Tyler Warren, or can be. Tough to say on that one. I think that I would hesitate to do that. If I was doing pure rankings, Warren would be my number one guy, but Loveland wouldn't be that far behind. He's so good that some of you have told me there's no way he gets to 18. I do think the fact that he had labrum surgery and that he's not expected to be 100% healthy by week 1 will cause some teams at the top of the draft to hesitate. I think there's a really good chance he's there at 18. I think that's probably around the range where I don't think he gets very far past 18 if he does. I think his range kind of kicks in at 15. But again, I could see him having such a high grade from the Seahawks that they maybe try to slide up a pick or two, especially if they're concerned that maybe the Bengals are going to snipe him at 17, although let's hope the Bengals are looking offensive line. 6'6", 248, elite route running and receiving skills. 20th all-time in catches at University of Michigan among tight ends and receivers. Over 12 yards per catch in his career. Only a 3.4% drop rate. Very sure hands. And he's just a great athlete for the position. And some people will try to tell you they think he's strictly a move tight end. I don't know why people don't think he can block. There's plenty of examples on tape of him being a very, very good blocker. Same can be said of everyone on this list. Mason Taylor and Elijah Arroyo, to me, are similar players because they're so athletic and they're such dynamic offensive weapons that some people just automatically assume because of their body type and because of how smooth they are as route runners that they're probably not very good blockers. They both are. And I don't think either of them would hurt you in either aspect. And so I kind of lump those two together. My grade on them are very, very similar. Taylor ahead of Arroyo because of sample size, because of additional production. He rewrote the record books at LSU, more catches and yards and touchdowns than any tight end in school history. The son of Jason Taylor, of course, the former great Miami Dolphin defensive end. He is excellent in pass protection in particular. Good enough as a run blocker, but he was so good in pass protection, they would sometimes keep him in when they would be facing some of the elite pass rushers in the SEC. That's how good he was there. And another guy, similar to Loveland, very sure-handed, just a 3.5% drop rate. And he's just He just makes it all look easy. He's such a natural athlete, and a lot more production over the last 3 years. Whereas Arroyo, only 11 catches his first 3 seasons at Miami, and then he was coming back off an injury last year, wasn't healthy to start the season, but once he did get on the field, was very productive. 17 yards per catch on 35 catches, 7 touchdowns. So we saw the flashes from him last year, catching passes from Cam Ward. Terrence Ferguson is a guy that was at the Senior Bowl and never really flashed for me. Like, never a guy that turned my head that I thought, okay, I need to look into him a little bit more. Until he went to the Combine and was maybe the best overall athlete there that did all the testing. 6'5", 255, 96th percentile vertical jump, over 75th percentile in the broad jump, the 40-yard dash, the 10-yard split. He has the most to work on of the 5 on this list as a blocker, but the traits are there. The skills are there. The want to is there. He doesn't shy away from blocking, just needs to get better at it. Was a very, very consistent performer at Oregon. 32 catches, 42 catches, and 43 catches his last 3 seasons, averaging over 12 yards per catch with 14 combined touchdowns. And then maybe my favorite player on this list, even though he's at number 5, just because of the versatility, the consistency, the production, and how much fun he could be, is Jalen Conyers. He's built differently than these guys. Not your traditional tight end build, 6'3", 260. But that leads into what I think his role might be in the NFL. First of all, he transfers to Texas Tech last year to be closer to home. Texas Tech is just 200 miles away from where he grew up. He spent his first 3 seasons at Arizona State. But this is the consistency. This is his production the last 3 seasons. 30 catches for 320 yards, 30 catches for 362 yards, 38 catches for 422 yards, 10 total touchdowns over that part of it. He's a very physical player at the tight end position, not just as a blocker, but run after the catch. He'll put his head down. He likes to take on tacklers. He looks like a fullback when he's running. And I use that word with intention because I do see some potential here for him to play a fullback role. And in fact, at Texas Tech last year, they used him as a wildcat quarterback. He had 30 rushes for 123 yards and 3 touchdowns as a runner. You know, Clint Kubiak, one of the few offensive coordinators in the league that uses a fullback, said when he was hired that they will have one on the roster. There is not one currently. The closest thing there may be on the roster to a fullback is Brady Russell, another tight end kind of built more like Conyers than he is like A.J. Barner, for example, and may get a shot in that role. But Conyers has done it. We've seen him do it as a wildcat quarterback, and there's some, it doesn't take a lot of projection to see the potential to have a very, very similar role to what we saw from Taysom Hill the last several years in New Orleans, but certainly Clint Kubiak is not just familiar with what he did down there with his 1 year there, but also he was the first part of his answer when asked what was the key to being so good on third downs in New Orleans last year. And he said, well, when you have a guy like Taysom Hill, it just really opens things up and it really makes you that much more dangerous on third down. So I could see Conyers playing sort of a similar type of role. Whew, so that's a lot. 3 position groups, right? My top 5 Seahawk fits at each of those spots. Tell me, as we've been doing all week long, what you think of the list, who I missed, who your favorite is, and if you do, put it in the comments down below and tell me why you think they're a fit for the Seahawks. Not just, hey, how about this guy? Tell me why you like him. And I will say this too, if there's a name you don't see on the list and you wonder why he's not there, again, very, very deep class. There's a number of, if I could have gone 10 deep on this class, and I think there's a lot of value there for the Seahawks. They're definitely going to take a tight end at some point. I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to that position when I do mock drafts. Sometimes I'll take one of those top guys on day 2. Typically, I get greedy at other positions, especially trench positions, and then I try to come back around and get one on day 3, and there are some good ones there as well. Come back tomorrow. We'll wrap this series up with the safeties and the quarterbacks. Until then, follow me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the channel. If you want to support me and the show, all those links are listed down below in the description as well. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, forever and always, go Hawks.